he didn't pay any federal income tax. So
that makes
if
me
he's
smart.
paid,
The Trump tax returns are out and the scrutiny is in. Will this latest information move the polls in a tight presidential race?
his latest Twitter meltdown is unhinged, even for him.
The candidates return to South Florida post-debate. Hillary Clinton's numbers are up, so where are those numbers heading?
We're still seeing cases. We're still seeing more cases.
The governor visits Zika-free Wynwood just as more mosquito samples are testing positive in Miami Beach. We will take that to the roundtable.
Good morning and welcome. The big election headline today is, of course, one of Donald Trump's tax returns now public. Both candidates in South Florida post-debate, but we begin with an important weather update.
We need to because this is a very big story. We are keeping a close eye on Hurricane Matthew, and Weather Authority meteorologist Jennifer Correa has the latest advisory on that storm. Jennifer, good morning. What's it say?
Good morning, Michael and Glenna. Well, Hurricane Matthew is still a powerful Category 4, but there have been a few changes going on with Matthew. The first one is the eye has shrunk, and this is infrared, but on visible, it's even harder to see the eye becoming obscured on visible satellite imagery. And that just shows a sign of some weakening, but only some, because it's still Category 4 with maximum sustained winds at 140 miles per hour. Now, it is tracking towards the west very slowly. This is actually going to probably add a delay to the timing here in the forecast cone, which we are seeing that. So now, as a Category 4, it'll be brushing that western tip of southern Haiti or southwest Haiti at 8 p.m. Monday. Still, remember, as a Category 4, then a Category 3 going over eastern Cuba through Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, 8 a.m., a little later than what was forecasted before, arriving into the south central portions of the Bahamas as a Category 3, which is still a major hurricane, expected to downgrade to Category 2 by Thursday. Still, this is going to be the closest approach to Florida. Notice the cone now brushing, looks like the Space Coast there, getting a little too close to the southeast coast as well. I'll have more on our local forecast coming up.
Jennifer, thank you so much. Now to vote 2016. Yes, it is true. We in the media seem to obsess over the polls, probably because it allows us to emphasize the horse race aspect of the elections.
And especially the Clinton-Trump poll numbers that show a presidential toss-up with momentum shifting pre and post-debate.
So how are these polls conducted and how qualified are the people who conduct them? What are their biases? Should we be more skeptical about the accuracy of the poll results we see?
Fernand Amandi is a professional pollster. His firm is Ben Dixon Amandi, and he recently added a role as talk radio host on WIOD, and that puts you in the hot seat today. Good morning.
We're glad to have you,
Thank you
Fernand.
for being here.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you, Michael. It's good to be in the hot seat.
All right. So, well, we know that at almost every campaign appearance, the first thing Donald Trump gets up and says is, we're doing great in the polls. But of course, it depends on which poll you look at.
It certainly does. Yeah. You know, one of the things he's taken to doing right now is citing online polls where you have hundreds of thousands of people, quote unquote, voting. Problem with that, Michael and Glenn, is that those polls are not scientifically done. Right. In essence, there's no limitations on the number of people that can vote. And you'll see a lot of times Trump supporters themselves go to those very polls and vote for Trump several times. So it's an interesting kind of phenomenon in terms of building crowd enthusiasm and enthusiasm for his campaign. Right. But in no way would any professional pollster look at that as a barometer of where the race stands. Well,
you know, the polls that we trust most often, generally speaking, today, post-debate, show, I think I saw 40% on average of the people, like right after the debate, who thought Hillary Clinton won, and that went up to 60%. But both claimed victory at first. And so Donald Trump is a sell. He's a sell guy. Yeah. And so doesn't his sell and enthusiasm in claiming victory sort of buoy his base anyway? Well,
it certainly does. And actually the very polls that you cite describe, the accurate ones, the scientific ones, show that if there is an enthusiasm gap in this campaign, it happens to be on the other side. Hillary Clinton supporters don't seem to be as enthused. However, does that translate into a majority of votes on Election Day? Right now, the polls are suggesting that there has been movement, Glenna, since that first debate. We remember after the Democratic convention, Hillary Clinton opened up a wide lead. Donald Trump was able to close that gap in the intervening weeks. But now, indeed, the polls that we're seeing suggest movement on her side post-debate.
Well, if we can, there was a poll, a Mason-Dixon poll done on Friday, released on Friday, done Tuesday through Thursday. Roughly 820 Floridians were polled by Mason-Dixon. Here are the results. It showed Hillary Clinton 46%, Trump 42%, Gary Johnson 7%, Jill Stein 1%. A margin of error here, 3.5%. When I saw this, I thought, gee, there has been movement since the debate on Monday night. And I also thought Mason-Dixon overall has a pretty good rep, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, they've tended in the past to be regarded as maybe oversampling a little bit of Republicans, so it's a poll that you're going to see as more conservative, but in the fact that they're showing a +4 for Hillary, yes, just outside of the margin of error, but Michael and Glenna, the most important thing in polling is always the trend line as opposed to where the horse race number is.
Explain what the trend line is.
And that's exactly right. The trend line suggests that if there is movement, you may not catch that movement at the moment the poll is taken, and there may be forward progress. So you always want to be the candidate with the momentum. I always say I'd rather have, be 1 or 2 points back than have a 10-point lead a month ago, because that shows that you're catching up in the consolidating the vote.
All right, so then the question becomes, what moves those numbers? Was it the headlines? Is it the Twitter storm in the middle of the night? Is it the distrust headlines for Hillary Clinton? Is it the tax return? What is it that's moving the numbers? And how easily do the numbers move?
Well, it's a great question, Glenna, and the way you have to look at it, these campaigns are fluid. So you're always trying to understand and determine what variable has been introduced into the campaign dynamic that might cause movement in the polls. And we see two happening right now. Number one was, of course, the debate. You had historic viewership of that debate. I think over 85 million Americans watched it. For a lot of Americans, the first time they've really tuned in. I know for us junkies, we've been watching this thing forever.
Sure.
A lot of folks were watching for the first time. Right. So that was a factor. The other factor, I think, is the fact that, look, we're now less than 40 days from the election. We're kind of in that period where the undecideds, those that are out there that unbelievably still are starting to make their decisions. So I think those are the two factors that show why movement is taking place.
Okay, but the people who are, this isn't a block of people. This is demographics. And I know you look very closely at demographics, yes. The women 18 to 54 and the men. And so when you have a headline, Donald Trump wakes up in the middle of the night and continues his tirade against Miss Universe, that does something to the polls maybe with one demographic but not another, or maybe the same topic can skew up and down depending on who's doing the voting.
Well, in the case of Trump, he's going to make a lot of pollsters maybe lose their words or their business because so many predicted he had no shot in the primary. So it's hard to just pin him down on one thing in particular. But I think what those do, that tweet storm on Friday night, it adds to an overall impression that perhaps he is not as with it as when it comes to what's going on, and they're looking for the temperament of potential commander-in-chief. I'd wait to see before we make some pronouncements on the Twitter impact and the Twitter effect, because it just happened Friday morning. It's Sunday, so I don't think any of the polls would have caught that effect yet.
Is it Friday? It seems so long
ago.
ago.
Believe it or not, it was like Thursday midnight going into Friday morning when that happened. Yeah. But I probably ill-advised on his part if you want to see movement come back to his way on the polls.
Yeah, Fernand, don't want to get into the weeds on exactly how you poll, but clearly you give tremendous thought to the phraseology, the way the question is posed, because as you well know, you can elicit the answer you want depending on how you ask the question. So how do you come up with the questions?
Michael, you really have to look at it from the perspective of the person hearing the question itself. If it in any way kind of strikes something that suggests, well, there may be a lean here, you're maybe putting your thumb on the scale, you have to throw it out, because for the pollster, their reputation and their accuracy is the most important thing. Right. So even submitting a question that doesn't pass the smell test is a bad thing for a pollster to do. So that's why you have to present it as cleanly as possible. And a lot of times, what we as pollsters will do is we will see how questions and topics are reported in the news media, right, particularly the unbiased news media, where it's WPLG Channel 10, whether it's the Miami Herald, and make sure that it's not a great deviation from how facts and information are being presented.
How do you poll every day? Do you have some sort of little poll that you do every day to have the numbers that close together to make your graph?
Excellent question. Oftentimes, that's what's called a tracking poll, and you'll have the ability to do that. You usually reserve that to the final 3 weeks of the campaign, and it becomes like a daily thermometer. But oftentimes, it's just a question of what budgets polls are allowed for, because polling is an expensive thing.
Yeah. Well, let me just hold up here is my copy of a Ben-Dixon-Amandi poll. It's an annual poll generally of survey of Cuban Americans. And to say that this has influence on policy, on governmental policy, I think understates it. I mean, these polls that you do on the state of the Cuban American community, not just in Miami, but throughout the country, is tremendous. I mean, that is one of the signatures of your firm.
Indeed it is, and I'd like to think it's because we've spent so much time looking at this community, studying it over 30 years, but what's fascinating is a lot of times, even though I study this community and I'm of this community, the numbers always surprise me sometimes, and that's always the sign that's an interesting poll because, for example, we did the first study after the normalization announcement. I was expecting massive opposition to it. And then at that time, it was evenly split. There were a little bit more folks against it than for it. And then when we looked at a year later, not really seeing massive change within Cuba, I thought you'd see the opposition consolidate and grow. And it was the exact opposite. More people seem to be supporting. So it's always an interesting dynamic.
And you've got a poll coming out on Thursday, a big poll?
Indeed, we do. We're doing a poll with Univision and perhaps the Washington Post, looking at Florida, the battleground. And we went into the field just 2 nights ago after the first debate and after this story on Trump perhaps breaking or potentially breaking the Cuban embargo. We'll report those numbers next week, but we've already seen movement, and you and I know the importance of Florida and the importance of Cuban voters. It could decide the election.
You know what? Huge topic. Let's wait 2 minutes, quick break. We'll come back and talk about that.
All right.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back. We are glad you are with us. We are with Fernan Amandi of Ben-Dixon and Amandi Pollsters in Coral Gables. Fernan, not to sound critical of you, but I happen to think that we in the media do put too much emphasis on polls. It's easier to report a horse race than it is to talk about taxes or immigration policy, national security. That's hard, but if I have a poll in front of me, I can simply say so-and-so is in front. I mean, you think in the media, obsess too much about polling?
Boy, you put me on the spot with a question like that, Michael, as a pollster, but I think the honest answer is yes. A lot of times you see polls dominating the coverage, the cycle, and this obsession about the horse race, who's up, who's down, as opposed to what's right and what's wrong. Sometimes tend, especially in these days, and I think it's just a function of the natural curiosity. Elections are like sporting events. It's the great unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. There's so much interest and there's so much on the line that the polls almost become a little bit like a cheat sheet because it gives you that insight into where the electorate's going.
Well, it's like a headline, because if you have a poll and you see the numbers, that's the headline. But if you dig down and see what were the questions, why did people answer like this, then you've got some depth and context to what the poll numbers are. But you know what you mentioned Twitter before.
Yeah.
I imagine your business is so different with the advent of social media that because now people are doing their own polls. And to your point earlier, you don't know where they're coming from, you don't know if they're scientific, but you do sort of get a sense of public opinion, do you not, from social media
no
you
question.
ever did before?
Absolutely, and you're going to see the polling industry, if you will, the public opinion research industry for that matter, transform itself over time, because right now what keeps it from just being a virtually fully online operation, Glenna, is that you still got folks that are not either for older reasons or economical reasons, they're not 100% online or have access to Twitter or the internet. Unlike telephones, we find everybody who's an adult in the United States has access, either via cell phone or a landline. But that's transforming and changing, and you're able to increase the sample sizes, which make it even more reliable and precise and accurate.
So you do excuse me for 1 second, telephone polling? Because I want to tell you, in my house and my telephone, I just started hitting the stop button because there have been so many lately. I'm sure everyone who has a telephone. So if you don't answer the phone, if I don't answer the phone, no pollster knows what I think, partly because of what I do for a living. But no pollster knows what I think. Maybe no pollster knows what someone else thinks with a really interesting take. Well, how do you get people to actually participate? You know,
it's funny because you do a representative sample, and while we may not get Glenna Milberg, we'll get someone of your age and your background and your political registration that's on the voter rolls. And what we'll find is if we do enough interviews, oftentimes the scientific sample size will bear out, and we'll see and we'll get the perspective of your type of thought process from those that do agree to participate in the polls. But you know, it's funny, we haven't found the rejection rate to have any higher or lower than in previous years.
Really?
I mean, it may have been a little bit higher on the margins in years past, but you're still able to get enough folks participating. And it's interesting because some people say the opposite. They love it when we call them because they want to express their opinion and point of view.
Sorry.
All right, let me ask you about a phenomenon which is well known to politicians. Maybe the people at home aren't so familiar. It's called a push poll.
Yes.
Where a campaign will devise questions to seemingly objective questions, but the point is to elicit opposition to whoever the candidate's opponent is. Explain how a push poll works.
A push poll is a little bit of dark science and a little bit of dark arts, and it can be useful in a campaign if the poll is not published as a representative independent poll that's not a push poll, because what a push poll can sometimes help you do is see if a message has an impact on changing the electorate's mind. Also, focus groups are a great tool for that. But a push poll that's passed off, where, as you say, Michael, the questions are loaded, the questions have an intent behind them, and they're utilized to change public opinion and then pass it off as the will or the perspective of voters, right, that is against the credibility and ethos and ethics of any reputable pollster.
So how would people know, who are not in the trenches every day, how would people be able to tell a scientific poll from a push poll?
Well, it all has to do with the transparency of the process by seeing the questions that are in the questionnaire, by looking at the crosstabs. And any reputable pollster believes greatly in transparency, especially when it's being reported on by the news media. You will make all of the facts and figures and the guts, if you will, of how that poll is constructed available so that the news media can examine it oftentimes beforehand. When we do polls with the Miami Herald, for example, every question, every aspect of the poll is pre-vetted and agreed to before the fact, so that they know and they're confident that what they're putting out there with their banner passes that test of reputation.
Fernand, I know it's not entirely kosher, but here we are 36 days or so before the election, and in Miami-Dade County it's a very tight race, it appears, between Carlos Jimenez, the incumbent, and Raquel Regalado. I mean, you're just a political pro. Where do you think that's going?
Well, right now, I still think that Carlos Jimenez is in the lead, but I think it was a big blow to him not to have won outright.
Right.
Because for him, he had been more than 5 years in office, kind of a super incumbent, if you will. And I know that their campaign put all of their resources into winning and having a statement election on that August or September primary.
And he got 48% rather than 50.1, which he needed.
And the other great unknown, Michael, is it's a completely different electorate. You and Glenna know that in August, very few people turn out as compared to in November, when everyone's going to turn out. We're coming out with a poll on that subject in a few weeks as well, and you'll be the first to know.
That was going to be my question, so you're not going to answer that now.
We're not going to answer that now, but we'll have those results soon for all of you.
We'll be talking with you, Fernand. Thanks.
Yeah,
thank you
very
so much.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure to speak with you.
Next up,
yep,
we take it all to the round table. Stay with us.
It is that time again to take a closer, more analytical look at the week's top news stories with our Powerhouse Roundtable.
And in fact, it is a roundtable repeat. We've invited the panel here that was last week. We were cut short last week with those unfolding developments into the fatal boating crash involving Marlins pitcher Jose Fernandez. And so welcome back Billy Corbin, a Miami-based documentary filmmaker who produced and directed Cocaine Cowboys, The U, and Dogfight, among others. H.T. Smith is a Miami attorney, a law professor at Florida International University, and a longtime civil rights leader in South Florida. Morning. Jessica Fernandez is the president of the Miami Young Republicans and was a delegate at the GOP convention in July in Cleveland. Welcome back, everybody.
We're glad you came back. Thank you very much. All right, here is this morning's New York Times lead story. Trump's 1995 tax records claim a $916 million loss. Billy Corbin, and it also says deduction means he could have avoided federal income taxes for 18 years.
That seems fair.
Objectively. Well, and it's legal.
Listen, I think I'm going to do what the Trump campaign likes to do on television, which is take a question about Trump and pivot to Hillary Clinton. If you know,
Did she pay her taxes?
It's the devil you know. Hillary Clinton has released tax returns going back multiple decades. I think for the last 15 years between New York State income tax and her federal income tax, she's been paying at a 41% rate. Very few, if any, major deductions. And if you want to know where the biases of the Clintons lay, if you want to know where their allegiances are, you look at the Clinton Foundation records, those are public record. Look at the tax returns, those are public record. If Donald Trump wants to continue to make this a guessing game, it's never going to go in his favor. No one's going to predict that it's better than we think that it is.
But you know what's so significant about the tax returns? A, it's perfectly legal. It appears to be legal. Counselor, maybe you can address this. And what he said at the debate when Hillary Clinton looked into the camera and said, you know, maybe he doesn't pay any taxes, and he says, well, that's smart.
Right.
And Rudy Giuliani this morning said, guy's a genius.
So
is it genius?
Well, Trump says he's going to make America great again, but not with his money, because he's too smart to pay taxes, and he's too smart to be investing in the important things in America. Those of us around this table and watching, you're the dummies and the suckers that are going to pay taxes and help me to make America again.
How is it we pay more taxes than Donald Trump? I only have one jacket. I mean, how is that possible?
Didn't Warren Buffett say he pays fewer taxes than his secretary does? Jessica,
that's why we have these digs.
Miss President of Young Republicans, would you like to address this?
Look, I think it's a distraction to be talking about, you know, how much taxes Donald Trump has or has not paid. I think that you have a secrecy that is involved in the Hillary Clinton campaign with all the thousands of emails that were hidden. I think Donald Trump, as a businessman, is doing the things that are legal, that are under the law, that have allowed him to do his taxes that way. He has not wanted to release his taxes. He says that he's under investigation and under an audit, and that's his prerogative, that he's taking legal advice from his counselors. And, you know, I think that he's doing the best thing for himself at this time. Do I think that Americans are curious to know his tax returns? Yes, and I think that he will release them, as he said, once the audit is complete. And I think that it's you know, there's a lot of things in the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton tax returns that we know Hillary Clinton has bought and paid for by foreign interests.
That's fine though, but then he can't run for president. I'm fine with him conducting his private business the way he wants to conduct his private business. There's nothing that precludes him from releasing his tax returns while he's under audit by the IRS. He's chosen not to do that. And as you said, he's looking out for his own best interest, but that's not what you do when you want to be president of the United States.
So did Hillary Clinton look out for her own best interest when she deleted 30,000 emails?
As I said, someone from the Trump campaign pivoting to Hillary Clinton, but what you didn't pivot to is the incredible transparency on this particular issue, on the issue of tax returns, on the issue of where their biases and allegiance lie. That you can determine that Hillary Clinton is biased. You can determine that she has foreign governments who have contributed to her campaign, or her foundation rather, but you can't say the same for Trump, because he won't release the information that every single presidential nominee has since Richard Nixon.
Well, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's just say he has 10 or 12 years worth of taxes that are being audited. Release the rest of them that are not being audited. He has something to hide. That can be the only reason he's doing it.
Jessica, if I may, the point I think that HT made early on is really the right one, which is all of us at this round table and people at home, everybody pays federal income taxes. And Donald Trump, I suspect, because he has very good lawyers and accountants, probably adhered to the law, did not break any laws by taking these huge tax deductions after he made bad investments. But it's really beyond the legal issue. It is just simply the equity, the fairness issue of it. Why does a very wealthy man get this kind of a break? And I think that regular folks, working people like us,
well, I think that we
are going to look at it and just simply say, that just doesn't smell right.
I think that we need to look at our political establishment, our leaders in Congress who pass these laws, and I think that they're the ones that need to answer to the American public is why they've crafted tax legislation in a way that allows many corporations, including Apple and Google, to book their earnings overseas. If Mr. Trump is using the American legal tax code to take away some of his tax burden, that is under his purview. That is his right as a businessman. If we allow these loopholes, then why are we criticizing him for that? We need to change the laws. That's fine. We have one of the highest corporate tax rates out of the G10, G8 countries, and I think that's the thing that Mr. Trump has talked about that we need to change. We need to make it easier for businesses in America.
Even Hillary Clinton says she's going to bring down the corporate tax rate.
But one other thing, though. No, he lost $1 billion in casinos. How the world do you lose $1 billion in casinos? He's claiming he's this great businessman. That's another reason we need to see his tax returns, to see if he's as rich as he is, and to see whether or not he's, losing money on things that anybody can make money on.
I have to agree with Jessica that if we have a tax code that says the richer you are, the less money you pay in taxes, that probably needs some fixing.
Right. I agree with that too.
All right, well, let's move on to the Twitter madness that occurred early Friday morning.
You'll have to tell HT what that is. He doesn't know what Twitter is.
I hardly know, but I know. We all
It was
know.
all over the news. So
We all know what happened at 3:15 a.m. on Friday, 5 days after the presidential debate. Donald Trump starts these tweets about the former Miss Universe, Alicia Machado, and he just is obsessed with her. He can't let it go. Jessica, when you first heard about this tweet, the cavalcade, what did you think?
I honestly feel very sorry for Miss Machado. She's another victim of Hillary Clinton use and abuse. I mean, this woman.
Wait, what?
I think that Hillary Clinton has used Miss Machado for nefarious purposes. I mean, all she's been done has been discredited in the media for threatening the life of a judge. I mean, I think that we're talking about women's issues and like this. No, actually, Donald Trump has proposed a plan that would empower women with paid leave at work when they get pregnant. I don't think that Miss Clinton is really focusing on what the real issues are.
She didn't send out these tweets. It was Donald Trump who sent out the tweets. I don't know what threatening a judge has to do with anything. I mean,
it goes to her credibility.
He said he was obsessed with her weight, and maybe when she was Miss Universe in that year, if she gained a lot of weight, it was a problem. That was 20 years ago. Why is he talking about it now?
Because Hillary Clinton's talking about it because she's trying to distract the American public from the real issues that are facing America. If we look at the video that is all widely available on the internet, you can just Google it on there. You see the behind-the-scenes video of Mr. Trump interacting with Miss Machado, and he's even calling attention to his own weight that he has to go. And he actually challenges the members of the media, hey, you guys need to lose weight too. And I think that this is a distraction. If we want to talk about the treatment of women, we should look at how Hillary Clinton has treated the women, have accused Bill Clinton of rape.
Well, this is another example of what we in the black community call the two faces of Donald Trump. The one face, I cherish women. The other face, he talks about women's menstrual cycles, their flat chest, their big whatever in the bottom. And he talks about women, you know, most women, I know all the women in my life struggle with weight. Weight shaming is one of the worst things you can do. Now, the point that Jessica is making is a point that's worth debating, but not on this subject. On this subject, this once again shows how the true face of Donald Trump is not positive for women.
Misogynistic?
Well, I don't want to go that far. I'll let the women say how they feel about whether he's a misogynist.
This woman needs to take a commercial break really quickly, and we'll be right back.
The article makes some pretty serious accusations that deserve a response, but I'm not going to base my opinion or make a statement on the basis of an article. One article by one journalist alone without more information.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio on Friday reacting to a question about how he feels. What is his reaction to the Newsweek article that Donald Trump in one of his businesses apparently appeared to want to skirt Cuban embargo laws in one of his businesses years ago? It puts, Jessica, does it not, especially in South Florida, politicians in the GOP in a really awkward position and now supporting Donald Trump. But how do you address that?
Well, I mean, I think the reports that came out subsequently after the Newsweek article, including some from the Miami Herald, which were later admonished by Newsweek, shows that, yes, you know, that Donald Trump, after his sending his associates overseas, as we can see by some paperwork, he wrote an op-ed in the Miami Herald that admonished the condition of the Cuban people at the hands of Fidel Castro and at the hands of the Castro brothers.
But what did he do? And that may be, but what did he do?
Donald Trump, in an exploratory, according to paperwork that we've seen, it basically states that there was a company, a third-party company that got OFAC approval to go to Cuba, and there was no business conducted there that we know of. Were these associates paid to do exploratory? Yes. Probably at the behest and at the blessing of the Clintons, which was at the time who was in power. Many businesses were going to Cuba because the United States Chamber of Commerce was trying to pressure the United States government to lift the embargo. And who's trying to lift the embargo now? Is it Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton?
Okay, I need to be a little fact checker here. 1998, it was illegal for the United States companies to do business in Cuba. But HT, you know, I think in fairness, we should point out that every big law firm in South Florida has its own little Cuba desk where good lawyers are looking at the laws and advising hotel chains and restaurateurs and other, construction companies about when they can go into Cuba.
Absolutely. And again, now we see the two faces of Donald Trump. We see the face of Donald Trump in 1999 that came down and told my brothers and sisters in the Cuban American community that Fidel Castro is a murderer and that every dollar spent in Cuba goes to the murdering Fidel Castro. And then we learned with the other face that the year before, Donald Trump had sent a consultant down to find out how he could invest and give money to the murdering Fidel Castro. Two faces, once again.
I think the most interesting thing about this is that those that are defending Donald Trump on this are the very same people that were crucifying Barack Obama for altering American policy earlier this year and ending this ridiculous failed 50-plus year embargo and reopening Cuba again, what Richard Nixon not dissimilarly did in China all those years ago. But here we are, this idea that Trump can do no wrong. I think what we're seeing, though, is the final vestiges of what's become known as Obama derangement syndrome. And the idea that no matter what he does or what he says, when it's Barack Obama who says it, he is wrong. And I don't know what that is born out of, but we've seen it most recently with the veto override on the 9/11 bill. Now all of a sudden there's buyer's remorse about that. Like, why didn't the president tell us this was a bad bill? It's like, well, he vetoed the damn thing if you weren't paying attention. So I think that's what we're seeing the final vestiges of. So it's a question of every time they say something about Barack Obama and Trump turns out to do exactly the same thing, or a Republican turns out to be, it's okay when the Republican or when Donald Trump does it. I don't get it.
I think Donald Trump is the only one that has said out of the candidates that are running that he would actually overturn President Barack Obama's executive action to
He broke the law. He broke the embargo. That's the objectively.
That's actually not true. The company that he contracted with has a signed piece of document from OFAC, the organization that allows these trips. They got authorization. They went there legally.
Jessica,
but he was not authorized to make
but
those
Jessica,
payments.
you must not have read the entire letter, because the letter with the bill showed Donald Trump how he could get around the OFAC requirement. It's right in the letter.
That makes him smart.
Okay, that's what
He's
was
a
in there.
genius, HD. And he knows how to subvert the law. That doesn't necessarily make him qualified to be president of the United States.
If we can, I want to move on to Zika, because Congress at last 7 months took, appropriated $1.1 billion, $900 million less than the president asked for Zika prevention programs, reimburse governments like Miami-Dade County, which has spent several $1 million fighting Zika. But Billy, this week we discovered, I went to the 5 locations on Miami Beach where they had put traps where they found the mosquitoes with the Zika virus, but they never, the state health department, Miami-Dade County, nobody told the people who lived in those residences that they had found those mosquitoes. I mean, how do you explain that?
There are so many issues at play here. First and foremost, let's be real. If one of the symptoms of Zika was men's penises falling off, Congress would have passed this law 8 months ago. Old, rich white men don't care about women's health. I don't think that's a breaking news story. The manner in which the government, from the local to the county, city, county, state, to the federal government, has completely botched this effort. I think you've seen the way you know all too well the way that the Rick Scott administration behaves in terms of their secrecy. Rick Scott and his cabinet have maintained private Gmail accounts where they have done state business and spent over $1 million in public money shielding those records from us.
Let's stay on Zika, because I do think that the governor has a tendency on Zika, as many other things, to create a bottleneck where all the information that was going to come out about Zika, he was going to do it. He had to come and do it in person. He has Lillian Rivera, who runs the Miami-Dade County branch of the State Health Department, is very competent. She wasn't allowed to speak.
Yeah, well, with the risk of offending Billy, I'm going to pivot away from men's penises and talk about Zika. Clearly, one of the problems was that the bottleneck with information was stuck in Tallahassee. Mm-hmm. And we see now the preparations for this Zika was not done either at the state level or at the local level. There is absolutely no justification for not telling people. I thought about the fact that I'm living there. You found Zika at my place, and you didn't tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there is still a lag time, because yesterday there was a fresh round of sampling. The results came back. It was the most northern point on Miami Beach, a 6th place. Still has to be confirmed by the CDC, but it looks like it's positive. And that sampling was done September 20th and announced yesterday. So that was a 10-day lag time between what happened. People are living with Zika mosquitoes.
But they're also telling us that Zika's out of Wynwood. It's out of, it's only a problem in Miami Beach. But there's 5 new cases locally transmitted, 4 of which are in Miami-Dade. Yeah. So this whole thing about Zika's out of Wynwood is totally disingenuous.
I think the communications has been totally botched, not just at the state level, here at the county level. People have a right to know what is out here that's facing us as a threat to us. We've known since January that we've been having a Zika outbreak, and we see now that our neighbors in Asia are experiencing a Zika outbreak. Is this part of our fault for not containing it faster? I think we can contribute to that. And I think that, this is going to really affect the Florida economy. One of my clients in the hotel associations, they're facing many room cancellations on a daily basis since this outbreak has started. As a priority for Florida, we need to tell the truth to people about what's happening, and we need to have a plan in place to make sure that we contain the further negative effects of Zika in Miami.
How can you trust your government when they won't tell you about a deadly disease that you can contract, even if it's at your house? Yeah. That's frightening.
I think this speaks to,
Good points. We are out of time, but thank you all. Billy, great to see you. Glad you're still wearing your black jacket. HT, great to see you.
Same here.
Jessica, thank you for coming in. Awesome. All right, next, the last surviving prosecutor from the Nuremberg trials is marking an anniversary this week, and our own Glenna Milberg spoke with him. Thursday marked 69 years since what is known as history's biggest murder trials began. We are talking about the Nuremberg trials of Nazi war criminals after World War II.
The chief prosecutor of that case is the last surviving prosecutor of the Nuremberg trials, and he is a South Florida resident. Ben Ferenc has a remarkable story to tell and showed us at 96 he is still going strong.
My family fled persecution and poverty in Transylvania. Came to New York, 4 immigrants, no money, no language.
Home for the moment is Delray Beach. Some neighbors don't even realize the legal legend among them.
In order to occupy my time, instead of getting bored, I try to save the world.
In some ways, Ben Ferenc already has.
This bottom picture is the actual Nuremberg courtroom.
Even 7 decades after, Ferenc remembers in vivid detail the 22 Nazi officers he prosecuted during the international military tribunals now collectively known as the Nuremberg trials. He was 27 years old.
I had never tried a case before. I'd never been in a criminal court before.
Chief prosecutor in what's been called the biggest murder trial in human history.
Do you remember your opening statement at all?
I made it all, yes I do. I called it was a plea of humanity to law.
The case we present is a plea of humanity to law.
The right of all people to live in peace and dignity regardless of their race or creed.
Ferenc had come to that courtroom Harvard Law School educated with a war crime specialty, then battle-worn, a private in General George Patton's army as it prepared to push into Nazi territory.
But I was assigned to go into the concentration camps as they were being liberated. The horrors of the camps can hardly be understood or felt by someone who was not there. The crematory was still going, the bones packed in front had been human beings were waiting to be burnt.
Do you feel it still?
I have never ceased to feel it.
The Nazi death squad's efficient documentation of their human extermination would become Ferenc's evidence against them at Nuremberg. 22 defendants guilty.
Death by hanging, death by hanging, death by hanging. 13 of them, death by hanging.
Ferenc's rooms are filled with books, his writings, his human rights awards. Materially, he lives a modest life.
My shoes cost $5 or whatever.
When? What year?
Oh, several years ago. This is a format.
More telling is the letter of gratitude for his $1 million donation to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum.
The world has not learned the lessons. It's happening as we speak all over the world.
At 96 years young, Ferenc is still on a mission.
3 simple words will change the world. Law, not war.
working to replace war and conflict with an international legal system, a global thinker, legal giant, and we learn, still a regular at the gym.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Still taking on the challenge, be it push-ups or peace and human rights, with strength, grace, and good humor.
That's the most ridiculous thing.
It was pretty ridiculous if you think about it, but he's such a good sport.
What a remarkable man.
Really great guy, and so thankful that he took the time for us and spent some time with us.
Wonderful story.
Thank you. Next, the hard sell is on for the solar amendment that appears on the November ballot, and you'll see why it is a little shady. Stay tuned.
We are still tracking Hurricane Matthew out there in the Caribbean, and Jennifer Correa is here with the 11 a.m. advisory. Jen.
Hi, Michael. And as of 11 a.m., it's still a powerful Category 4, maximum sustained winds at 140 miles per hour. In the meantime, the eye of Hurricane Matthew is actually becoming more visible on satellite because it did disappear for a few hours. It was disappearing, which showed a sign of weakening, but still a major hurricane Category 4 that will be approaching Haiti by Monday later in the evening, a Category 3 by Tuesday evening over eastern Cuba, then in the Bahamas as a Category 3 by later Wednesday, and then Thursday it will be east of the state of Florida. Now back here at home, we have showers and some heavy downpours out there right now. It is West Broward, Weston, all the way down into Miramar, Pembroke Pines, dealing with thunderstorms out there. If you hear the thunder and you're outside, make sure to head indoors. Highs today can still get into those upper 80s. We're keeping the rain chances high for today at 50% and through this upcoming week.
Jennifer, thanks. Under the theory that the harder someone tries to sell you something, the higher the chance is that that something is not a good idea, time to raise the radar. A barrage of advertising is underway with a sunny sell of Amendment 1. The so-called solar amendment is the first constitutional amendment question you'll see on the ballot next month, and it is not what it appears. And that becomes clear just by breaking down the ballot question. The first sentence establishes a right for consumers to own or lease solar equipment installed on their property to generate electricity for their own use. Well, you can do that right now, today. That changes nothing. So next, state and local governments shall retain their abilities to protect consumer rights and public health, safety, and welfare. Well, government has that ability right now. That's what government is supposed to do. So then there's the last part, to ensure that consumers who do not choose to install solar are not required to subsidize the cost of backup power and electrical grid access to those who do. So that does not happen now. And that last part is left vague enough to leave you wondering why it would. This is a scare tactic. So what would the solar amendment do? Well, it would give the electrical monopolies the ability to prevent you from getting credits and savings if you do decide to install your own solar, and then give the extra power you make back to the greater grid. The amendment makes it a deterrent in some ways for people to help grow Florida's solar industry. And that is why Florida Power and Light, Duke Energy, Gulf Power, Tampa Electric, they are all funding the Political Action Committee that's spending tens of millions trying to sell you on voting for the amendment with a confusing message about it being good for the environment and the economy. The only thing Amendment 1 will do is protect the profits of the very monopolies that currently have you locked into paying their bills every month. So, what do you think? We invite you to weigh in on any topic you like.
You can do that by email, Facebook, Twitter, at any of these addresses. We're easy to find, and we will get back in touch with you. Remember, stay informed, get involved.
Have a beautiful Sunday. Stay dry.